Hello, everyone. How are you this morning? I'm fine. This is Joe Firestone for Embracing Democracy. And our topic this morning is some hopeful updates. Now, did I say embracing democracy? Sorry. I meant actually empowering democracy. Sometimes I get mixed up between embracing and empowering. Okay, I want to begin this stream with some more election results. There are not many new ones, of course, but I'm just going to review what there is that's new at 5:38. So let me share that with you. So 5:38 got going this morning at 9:06 a.m. and Nathaniel Rakich said yesterday nearly every county in Colorado's third district, that is Lauren Boebert's district, of course, finalized its unofficial vote totals, adding in mail ballots that voters cured over the past week. Curing a ballot means fixing an error with it so that it will count, like confirming with a voter that's really her signature. That cut Republican Lauren Boebert's lead to 551 votes, which is close enough to trigger an automatic recount. As a result, the race still doesn't have a projected winner, but it's very likely to be Boebert, since recounts rarely overturn margins that are that large. 551 votes doesn't seem like a large margin to me, but I think the record of recounts and the success and failure of recounts shows that that is a large margin, that it's unlikely to result in a win for Adam Frisch, who's the competitor to Lauren Boebert in that race. Moving on, ABC News is reporting Democratic Representative Katie Porter is projected to defeat Republican Scott Baugh in California's 47th district. Baugh seemed to have a shot at overtaking Porter as California's vote count proceeded, but in the end, Porter held off Baugh's challenge to win a third term. Porter is one of the leading fundraisers in the House, and with 89-year-old Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein likely to retire, Porter might eye a statewide run for Senate rather than another tough battle for re-election in this light blue seat. We'll see. I think this depends in part on when Feinstein decides to leave. If, for example, she decides to leave now, or soon, sometime in the lame duck, then Porter might eye the seat, but whether Newsom chooses to appoint her or not, okay, is another matter. If Feinstein leaves sometimes this spring, then there's still a question of who Newsom appoints to fill that seat. Porter might still run for the seat if a special election is held, of course. But then there might be somebody else who's in the way, who's been appointed. Anyway, we'll just have to see how that works out. Here's a longer entry which speaks to the larger questions about the outstanding races. We're getting toward the end of the road with the elections for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 2022 midterms. As things stand, Republicans have 218 seats and Democrats have 212, according to ABC News estimates. Of course, 218 seats is the bare amount, but that you need to have the majority and to be able to appoint a speaker. The winning party in the remaining 5 seats still has not been projected. Several House races are still up in the air. The Alaska District 1 race between Mary Peltola, Sarah Palin, and one of the Begiches, I think it's Norm Begich, is still out there. It's a ranked choice voting situation. It's very likely Mary Peltola will get enough in the ranked choice voting to be elected. That seat is probably going Democratic. There are 4 other seats that are up for grabs. In other words, that would give the Democrats 213 votes. Okay, whereas they now have 212. The California 3rd, only 60% of that vote is in. That's between Jones and Kiley. The Republican is Kiley. Kiley has a lead of 9,479 votes, which is a pretty big lead, but on the other hand, 40% of the vote is outstanding. So you have to say that Jones still has a chance. Jones, of course, probably has to get 55% of the vote or something like that, but to win, so that's not easy, but you still have to say Jones has a chance. California 13th, Adam Gray is contesting with John Duarte, and Duarte has a lead, a small lead of 827 votes, with 71% of the vote in. So it would be pretty easy for Gray to catch up. It depends upon what kinds of precincts are outstanding in that congressional district and the makeup of those particular precincts. I don't have access to that information right now, so that race still looks to me like it's a toss-up in terms of the information I have. In the California 22nd, David Valadao, who's the incumbent, is in a contest with Rudy Salas, or Salas, not sure how he pronounces it. 51% is reporting thus far. That's probably going to take the longest time to come in. There's a big lead for Valadao right now of 4,445. But with 49% of the votes still left to come in, it isn't that big a lead. And what it basically means is if the Democratic parts of the district are still outstanding, then Rudy Salas may be able to catch up. And the final race that's outstanding is the Colorado 3rd. In there, it's Adam Frisch facing Boebert. Almost all the vote is in, 99%, but there's enough vote outstanding still. Well, the key there is that there's very small lead for Boebert. It's in the automatic recount range, so there is going to be an automatic recount. It looks like 551 votes will be enough for Boebert to survive the recount, but we just have to see. That race is still uncertain. The most certain race among these outstanding races is the Alaska First, and the Democrats are likely to win that. So you can pretty well count on 218 to 213 right now. However, the Republicans are favored in the other four races. If they prevail, the count would be 222 to 213. If they lose one, it would be 221 to 214. If they lose two, it would be 220 to 215. So those are the numbers we are talking about here. Okay, I could read the rest of this, but basically it says what I just said to you. In the Jones-Kiley race, in the California 3rd, Jones needs about 54% of the 132,000 votes left to be counted. This is an R+7 seat, so according to 538, that may be a tall order. But again, it depends on what the rest of the district actually looks like. Depends on the demographics in there. In the 13th district, Duarte leads Gray by less than 1 point, 50.3% to 49.7%. That's a thin lead, but Duarte seems more likely to retain an edge. Gray needs to win 56% of the 6,000 or so outstanding votes. So in all these races, it's 54% in one of them, it's 53% in another one of them. 56% in another one of them, 54% in the third race. Seems like the Republicans have an advantage, but it depends on the demographics of the votes that are outstanding. So those are the updates at 538. I've sort of given you where this is likely to end up. So I am going to move on to the hopeful updates. Maybe that was a hopeful update. I'm not sure. But let me share the screen for the next one. So the next one is about Fancy Nancy. Okay, this is a piece from Common Dreams about the news of last night. that Nancy Pelosi is withdrawing from leadership. There she is. She announces she will not run for House leadership post. This was done by the Common Dream staff last night, November 17th, 2022. House Speaker Pelosi announced on Thursday that she plans to continue representing her Bay Area constituents for the remainder of her 2-year term, but will not seek re-election to a congressional leadership post. Quote, no matter what title you all, my colleagues, have bestowed upon me, Speaker, Leader, Whip, there is no greater official honor for me than to stand on this floor and to speak for the people of San Francisco, the powerful California Democrat said in a much anticipated address that comes one day after Republicans won narrow control of the House. Quote, this I will continue to do as a member of the House, speaking to the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution, unquote. Pelosi continued. Quote, and with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress, unquote. The 82-year-old lawmaker's decision fulfills a 2018 pledge to limit herself to 4 more years as the Democratic Party's leader. Pelosi, the first and so far only woman Speaker of the House, was first elected to the position in 2007, serving the role until Democrats lost control of the chamber in 2011. She was again elected Speaker in 2019 after Democrats regained control of the House. Quote, we must move boldly into the future, grounded by the principles that have propelled us this far and open to fresh possibilities for the future, Pelosi said. For me, the hour has come, this is another quote, for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I am grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility. Oh, really? Who of them are ready to shoulder this awesome responsibility, unquote. Several House Democrats with leadership ambitions will soon begin vying to replace Pelosi in the wake of her announcement. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer will not be among them. In a letter shared immediately after Pelosi's speech, Hoyer told Democrats that, quote, now is the time for a new generation of leaders. Boy, I can't agree more. These were terrible, unquote. And endorsed Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York. That was Steny Hoyer's endorsement. Pelosi's speech comes about 3 weeks after her husband, Paul Pelosi, was violently assaulted by an adherent of right-wing conspiracy theories who was looking for the speaker. Pelosi thanked her husband for his support and her colleagues for their well wishes as he continues to recover. Quote, American democracy is majestic, but it is fragile. But many of us here have witnessed its fragility firsthand, tragically, in this chamber, said Pelosi, referring to the deadly January 6th Capitol attack fomented by former President Donald Trump, whom she did not name when recounting her years of collaboration with numerous presidents, past and present. Quote, democracy must be forever defended from forces that wish it harm, unquote, She continued, quote again, last week, the American people spoke, and their voices were raised in defense of liberty, of the rule of law, and of democracy itself, unquote. Quote again, with these elections, she added, quote again, the people stood in the breach and repelled the assault on democracy. They resoundingly rejected violence and insurrection. So that's what she has to say. It was later learned that James Clyburn is not going to vie for leadership as well, that he is stepping down. So the three main leaders are stepping down. Two other leaders, Hakeem Jeffries and Catherine Clark, will probably be among those who will be vying for leadership. We do not know who the others are who may be vying for leadership. We do know that there's no election that has taken place thus far. So, I suppose what I have to say about that is that I think it might be bad strategy. Well, I'm not going to really say that. Yeah, well, I guess I will say that. I think it may be bad strategy for any progressive candidates to announce that they're going to vie for leadership. I would certainly like to see some of them be the leader for the Democrats, the minority leader in the House. But I don't think that highly visible members of the CPC, with the possible exception of Katie Porter, would be acceptable to the right wing of the caucus. Okay, so I think what the progressives ought to do is to hang back and allow others to vie for leadership, and have others come to the progressives who should stand together as a bloc, okay, and negotiate with those others for favors. I also think that certain candidates for leadership should be unacceptable to the progressives. And I mean, not just to the squad, but to most of the progressives in the caucus. Now we know that in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, there are many people who are not progressive. But there are probably 50 members of the caucus to whom Hakeem Jeffries, a corporate Democrat, should be unacceptable. Whether Catherine Clark should be unacceptable is another matter. She's a co-sponsor of Medicare for All. She's a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. But I don't know how strong she is for these particular policies. She is a Massachusetts Democrat. So she may really sincerely support these policies. I think the people in the House know more about how acceptable these would be to her and know more about how they would be able to negotiate with her for committee positions, for floor votes, for rules changes. That can be very important, depend upon the nature of the rules changes. But those are three things that have to be negotiated for in exchange for progressive support. As I say, there are probably 50 real progressive people in the CPC. They should band together as a bloc, and they should be negotiating together for rules changes that reduce the extent of hierarchy that there is in the caucus of the Democratic Party. Right now, the ranking Democrat has a great deal of control, okay, according to party rules. That should be weakened so that the backbenchers have more to say, so that they can really represent their districts. Rules changes are needed for that to happen. Of course, the rules changes are up to the whole House. So they might be able to not to get the rules changes they want. Rules changes are also very much dependent on the Speaker. So they may not be able to negotiate what they want. They may still be able to negotiate for committee positions, and they still may be able to negotiate for floor votes. Except even those two things are constrained because they don't have the majority. And the Republicans are the ones who are going to allow or not to allow floor votes. And the president can have a role in that, but also the Democrats can have a role because the margins in the House are small enough that Kevin McCarthy's position as Speaker is threatened. There are a number of extremists who will not vote for him under any circumstances, or so they say. If that holds, in order to get to 218 votes and to become the Speaker, he may have to appeal to Democrats for support. In that case, those Democrats should be negotiating with Kevin McCarthy for the rules changes, also for committee positions, if he needs their support to become the Speaker, they should exact a high price. Next. A real piece of good news, a real hopeful sign. Of course, I considered the resignation of Nancy Pelosi to be a hopeful sign. Obviously, that's one of the hopeful signs because the Democrats need badly new leadership. could spend a long time talking about the mistakes Pelosi made in this latest round in the Congress. She probably would not agree they were mistakes, but I think over the last 2 years that her performance was terrible. Anyway, another hopeful sign was the defeat of Ron DeSantis in relation to one of the measures that he got passed, citing George Orwell. Judge blocks, quote, positively dystopian, unquote, censorship law backed by DeSantis. It's by Jake Johnson on November 17th. In an order that begins by quoting the famous opening line of George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, a federal judge on Thursday blocked key provisions of a Florida censorship law that aimed to restrict how state university professors teach race, gender, and U.S. history. Quote, it was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13, unquote. And the powers, and the clocks were striking 13. And the powers in charge of Florida's public university system have declared the state has unfettered authority to muzzle its professors in the name of freedom, quote unquote. Judge Mark Walker of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida, an Obama appointee, wrote in his scathing decision, which temporarily halts enforcement of parts of the law championed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, a possible 2024 presidential candidate. Quote, to confront certain viewpoints that offend the powers that be, the state of Florida passed the so-called, quote, Stop Woke Act in 2022, redubbed in line with the state's doublespeak, the, quote, Individual Freedom Act. Walker continued, quote again, the law officially bans professors from expressing disfavored viewpoints in university classrooms while permitting unfettered expression of the opposite viewpoints. Defendants argue that under this act, professors enjoy, quote, academic freedom, unquote, so long as they express only those viewpoints of which the state approves. This is positively dystopian, unquote, said the judge, Mark Walker. The Thursday decision, which concludes that the GOP law violates the First Amendment rights of public university faculty and students, marks the second time Walker has ruled against the, quote, Stop Woke Act in recent months. In August, the judge blocked a part of the law pertaining to private businesses. The Thursday decision, which concludes that the GOP law violates the First Amendment rights of public universities, faculty, and students. Oh, I read that already. Sorry. Adriana Navoa, a University of Florida, South Florida history professor and a plaintiff in the case, said in a statement that Walker's Thursday ruling is a win, quote, for the institutions of this country, unquote. Quote, I hope the courts will defend the existence of a public education that cannot be manipulated by politicians to push any ideology now and in the future, unquote, she added. Mark Joseph Stern tweeted, Judge Mark Walker halts DeSantis law censoring public university professors from expressing, quote, woke, unquote, views in the classroom, condemning Florida's, quote, positively dystopian, quote, unquote, effort to, quote, impose its own orthodoxy of viewpoints, unquote, in violation of the First Amendment. And quoting from the document itself, that is to say, the decision, striking at the heart of, quote, open-mindedness and critical inquiry, unquote, the state of Florida has taken over the, quote, marketplace of ideas to suppress disfavored viewpoints and limit where professors may shine their light on specific ideas. May shine their light on 8 specific ideas. And defendant's argument, okay, the defendant is the state, of course, in this case, permits zero restraint on the state of Florida's power to expand its limitation on viewpoints to any idea it chooses. One thing is crystal clear: both robust intellectual inquiry and democracy require light to thrive. Our professors are critical to a healthy democracy, and the state of Florida's decision to choose which viewpoints are worthy of elimination and which must remain in the shadows has implications for us all. If our, quote, priests of democracy, unquote, are not allowed to shed light on challenging ideas, then democracy will die in darkness. But the First Amendment does not permit the state of Florida to muzzle its university professors, impose its own orthodoxy of viewpoints, and cast us all into the dark. Pretty nice decision, don't you think? Part of a recent wave of censorship laws advanced by Republicans in Florida and across the U.S., the, quote, Stop Woke Act, unquote, was billed as an attempt to give businesses, employees, children, and families tools to fight back against woke indoctrination. But civil liberties groups and other critics of the law have argued it is both unjustifiable and exceedingly vague in its mandates, creating a chilling effect on educators as they attempt to teach their classes under the threat of state retaliation. Emily Anderson, an assistant professor of international relations and intercultural education at Florida International University, told the Miami Herald in August that these policies that these policies have really led to increased efforts to silence and surveil academic speech, unquote. Quote, academic speech matters because it's a fundamental freedom that is really how our university system is grounded, unquote, said Anderson. And quote again, when we have policies that threaten speech, in my view, it shadows threats to all other protected rights, unquote. In his ruling, Walker points to the 8 specific concepts outlawed that are under the measure, including the notion that, quote, such virtues as merit, excellence, hard work, fairness, neutrality, objectivity, and racial colorblindness are racist or sexist or were created by members of a particular race, color, national origin, or sex to oppress members of another race, color, national origin, um, 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 or sex. Quote, despite Florida officials' insistence that the professor plaintiff's proposed viewpoints must serve as a mirror image for each prohibited viewpoint, the proposed speech needs only to arguably run afoul of the prohibition, unquote, wrote Walker. Adam Steinbaugh, an attorney with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, which sued Florida officials over the censorship law, said that, quote, faculty members are hired to offer opinions from their academic expertise, not toe the party line, unquote. Quote, Florida's argument that faculty members have no First Amendment rights would have imperiled faculty members across the political spectrum, unquote, said Steinbaugh. Emerson Sykes, senior staff attorney with the ACL Speech Privacy and Technology Project, said in a statement that Walker's ruling, quote, is a huge victory for everyone who values academic freedom and recognizes the value of inclusive education, unquote. Quote, the First Amendment broadly protects our right to share information and ideas. This includes educators and students' right to learn, discuss, and debate systemic racism and sexism, unquote. Sykes added. So that's it. It was a slap in the face, to DeSantis, and I should add, a very well-deserved slap in the face to DeSantis and to the others in the legislature in Florida who thought that such a law would survive the courts in the United States. Next, here's a picture of Bernie, also known as the Burn. New Bernie Sanders book to declare, quote, let me share this. New Bernie Sanders book to declare, quote, it's okay to be angry about capitalism, unquote. This is from Jessica Corbett, November 17, 2022. Quote, it's okay to be angry about capitalism presents a vision that extends beyond the promises of past campaigns to reveal what would be possible if the political revolution took place, if we would finally recognize that economic rights are human rights, and if we would work to create a society that provides a decent standard of living for all. This isn't some utopian fantasy. This is democracy as we should know it, unquote. That's according to Penguin Random House, which will publish the forthcoming book by U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, on February 21st, 2023. Written with journalist John Nichols, a national affairs correspondent at The Nation. It's okay to be angry about capitalism offers, quote, a progressive takedown of the uber capitalist status quo that has enriched millionaires and billionaires at the expense of the working class, on a blueprint for what transformational change would actually look like, unquote, the publisher also said. The publishing director, Thomas Penn, described the book as a, quote, scorching denunciation of a system that is manifestly failing the vast majority of people along with the planet itself, unquote. Quote, but there is, he says, another way if we are prepared to call out uber capitalism for what it is. Together we can bring about transformational change, Penn told The Guardian. Humane, clear-eyed, and yes, angry. This is a vital book for our times and for our future. We are thrilled to be publishing it. Hi. Hi. This is from Twitter. Bernie Sanders has changed U.S. politics forever. At Owen Jones, 84. Bernie Sanders. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. We'll publish globally next February. A blueprint for real change. You can read all about it here. And there is a bit.ly link where you can read all about it. I guess I'll click on that link myself, but not share it. There's Bernie. Sanders is in his third term in the Senate, which he joined after 16 years in the House of Representatives. News of it's okay to be angry about capitalism comes on the heels of last week's midterm election, and as the senator, currently chair of the Budget Committee, seeks to lead the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, HELP, next year. A longtime advocate of universal health care, climate action, labor rights, and raising taxes on the rich, Sanders sought the Democratic nomination for president in both 2016 and 2020, declaring at the outset of his second presidential campaign that, quote, together we can create a nation that leads the world in the struggle for peace and for economic, racial, social, and environmental justice, unquote. The senator's previous books include Our Revolution, A Future to Believe in, and Bernie Sanders' Guide to Political Revolution, 2017, and Where Do We Go From Here, 2018. The unreleased book has already won praise from renowned French economist Thomas Piketty, who said that, quote, Sanders' success today shows that much of America is tired of rising inequality and these so-called political changes and intends to revive both the progressive agenda and the American tradition of egalitarianism, unquote. And British writer Owen Jones was more concise, simply saying, quote, Bernie Sanders has changed U.S. politics forever. I think a new book by Bernie is always a hopeful sign for democracy. and to frame it as it's okay to be angry about capitalism, I guess that in itself is a small contribution. So next, there's news about Twitter. This news comes incredibly rapidly after its takeover by Elon Musk. We share the screen for this. Guess what? This is another Common Dreams article. This one is by, oh, there's a picture of Elon carrying something in the Twitter offices. The headline is Twitter verges on collapse as workers quit in revolt against, quote, notorious union buster Elon Musk. It's by Jake Johnson. It was done today, November 18th, 2022. Twitter workers reportedly quit by the hundreds Thursday after refusing to agree to billionaire CEO Elon Musk's demand that they work longer hours as part of his self-described, quote, extremely hardcore plan to overhaul the media platform. As a result, the company that Musk purchased, hang on a second, I've had to move around, so let me make sure my camera is still set up well. I think I've got to adjust this a little bit. Right, there we go. As a result, the company that Musk purchased for $44 billion just weeks ago is in chaos as the mass exodus of employees and the billionaire's earlier decision to fire roughly half of Twitter's workforce are threatening basic day-to-day operations at the platform used by hundreds of millions of people around the world. It's no coincidence that a notorious union buster and flagrant violator of labor law is effectively running one of the most viable tools we have for union organizing into the ground, unquote, responded the AFL-CIO as news reports derailed the internal turmoil at the company as Musk and his advisors scrambled to stop key employees from quitting. Citing people familiar with the rapidly deteriorating situation inside Twitter, the Washington Post reported that the number of engineers tending to multiple critical systems had been reduced to 2, 1, or even 0, unquote. In an early sign that the number of those declining to sign was greater than anticipated, Musk eased off a return to office mandate he had issued a week ago, telling employees Thursday that they would be allowed to work remotely if their managers assert they are making, quote, an excellent contribution, unquote. The Post added, but it was too late to keep Twitter from a precarious position, several workers said. One worker told a newspaper that there is no longer even a skeleton crew manning the system, meaning the platform will continue to coast until it runs into something and then it will stop, unquote. Corporate advertisers have been rushing toward the exits, pushed by Musk's hasty revamp of the verification process, which enabled some embarrassing and revealing spoofs of large companies such as pharma giant Eli Lilly and the weapons maker Lockheed Martin. The apparently dire situation brought on by Musk's haphazard and dictatorial management decisions sparked a cascade of, quote, RIP Twitter, unquote, posts on the platform as users, including journalists, lawmakers, prominent public figures, and ordinary people, wondered about the platform's immediate and long-term future. As a lot of freelancers have been saying, if Twitter goes down, our livelihoods suffer, unquote, tweeted labor journalist Kim Kelly. Quote, Twitter is where I share my work, promote my book, connect with editors, sources, other journalists, workers, activists, and organizers. We all know no corporate media outlet is going to hire me, unquote. What anti-worker, union-busting, sniveling sack of shit billionaire is casually torpedoing the livelihoods of thousands of precarious media workers in the name of, quote, free speech, Kelly wrote. Quote, the media elite will be fine. Their platforms are safe. It's the rest of us who will be hung out to dry, unquote. And Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, who has 13.5 million Twitter followers, connected the possible collapse of the platform to sky-high income and wealth inequality and policymakers' refusal to tackle it via higher taxes on billionaires like Musk. Quote, if only we had taxed the rich, unquote, the New York Democrat wrote, quote, maybe none of this would have happened, unquote. And she tweeted, shout out to all workers at Twitter. You all built a vital place for connection and deserved so much better. Millions of people appreciate the space you built and the hard work that went into it. Thank you. And she sent a heart. Musk had given Twitter employees until 5 p.m. ET Thursday to decide to accept his condition of longer work hours or leave the company and receive 3 months of severance pay. Hundreds of employees, including some in charge of important operations, appear to have chosen the latter. Quote, we are witnessing the real-time destruction of one of the world's most powerful communication systems, unquote. Said Nicole Gill, co-founder, excuse me, and executive director of Accountable Tech, an advocacy group. Quote, Elon Musk is an erratic billionaire who is dangerously unqualified to run this platform, unquote. Quote, unless and until Musk can robustly enforce Twitter's existing community standards, unquote, Gill continued, the platform is not safe for users or advertisers. Elon's hellscape is already here, unquote. The New York Times reported late Thursday that Musk and his top advisors held meetings with some Twitter workers who they deemed critical to stop them from leaving, and sent out confusing messages about the company's remote work policy, appearing to soften his stance on not allowing people to work from home before warning their managers. Quote, Twitter later announced via email that it would close, quote, our office buildings and disable employee badge access until Monday, the Times noted. According to The Verge, multiple critical teams inside Twitter have now either completely or near completely resigned, unquote. That includes Twitter's traffic and front-end teams that route engineering requests to the correct back-end services, the outlet reported. Quote, the team that maintains Twitter's core system libraries that every engineer at the company uses is also gone. Quote, you cannot run Twitter without this team, a departing employee said, unquote. Musk, meanwhile, has continued making bizarre and flippant posts on the platform. There's a picture of a gravestone there with Twitter on it and a person kneeling, giving the victory sign, face covered by the Twitter logo. By Jessica Gonzalez, CEO of the advocacy group Free Press, said in a statement Friday that, quote, Musk has swiftly decimated Twitter's ability to maintain the platform's integrity, health, and safety, unquote. His reckless actions, including sacking most of his staff and compelling others to leave, have caused an explosion of hate speech, conspiracy theories, and fraud on the site, said Gonzalez. If there is one lesson that all social media platforms must take away from this debacle, it's that without protecting users from hate and lies, you have no company at all. Invest in the health and integrity of your platforms or risk extinction, unquote. Quote, millions of people around the world rely on Twitter to challenge oppressive regimes, shed light on abuse, and organize for justice, Gonzalez added. Quote, minority groups that traditional media gatekeepers have kept from mainstream audiences have used Twitter to organize for a better world. That's why we'll continue to fight for a better Twitter, even as we aspire toward a non-exploitative platform that puts the public good over the hate and lie for profit model that animates every major social media company. Well, why did I think that was hopeful? Why that was a hopeful sign was because of the outrageousness of what is happening at Twitter right now. It becomes clear to all that reform of our social media platforms must occur. They must be safer places to interact. They must take care of their users. They must avoid making arbitrary decisions with unintended consequences of the kind being made by Elon Musk. That lesson is being brought home to people by the experience of Twitter falling so pronouncedly and so fast. So that's all. Okay, I am going to entertain the few comments I've had for this one. CC Swift says, 12 o'clock break. Hello, Joe. Checking by while I have a minute. Pelosi is probably the reason why China is getting its military outfitted for war That was just one of the terrible things she did. She bears part of the blame for people not getting $15 an hour minimum wage. She bears a part of the blame for not getting permanent child tax credits into the American Rescue Plan. She bears a good part of the blame for the heart being cut out of the Build Back Better effort. All the things that were going to be done for people in that bill being cut out by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema without any serious opposition. Pelosi is a caver. She's a caver. And she caved on very important issues and got the Congressional Progressive Caucus and Pramila Jayapal to cave also. She had a disgusting record in both domestic policy and foreign policy over the last 2 years. I am so glad she's finally going. CC Swift says, it's ironic that a bunch of Musk's employees walked out today because they were asked to go along with some secrecy crap. Haven't had time to read it, but damn, sounds like some stop woke, quote unquote, type of ploy. Could very well be, CC, could very well be. Okay, that's all for me for this stream. I'll be back. I should be back at 3 today. Anyway, somewhere in the time frame 3 to 4:30, I will return. Thank you very much. By the way, don't forget my Patreon account. Patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And my Buy Me a Coffee account, buymeacoffee/Joe.Firestone. I keep forgetting the Patreon account is Joe_Firestone.